You good?
Yeah. Good till it falls over.
At least in a van, the tires stay kind of warm. In a trailer, when they're ice cold, they'll slip on this polished floor in a heartbeat. Accelerated Technologies was created back when I raced motorcycles. I found that there was a huge improvement to be had in terms of suspension. When you make an improvement to the suspension, the rider is able to take that motorcycle faster but still remain in his or her safe comfort zone. How I started the company was selfishly trying to make my own motorcycles work better. And then when I quit racing, the demand was there for somebody who had a realization of how to make suspension systems work better. That's soft. It almost won't balance on the side stand by itself. Yeah. We can fix that. Doing a suspension service on its own, it doesn't set the bike up for you. Having the fork seals changed, having the oil changed, it gets it back to a like-new status, but it doesn't change the fact that our specialty here is making sure the bike is good and perfect for you as a rider.
When motorcycles come from the factory, we pay a lot of money for them. How come they aren't set up for me?
That's a great question, Neil. I imagine in Italy, the rider that they engineered this bike around was probably 160, 165 pounds, 5'8". The point is we don't know exactly what that rider looked like, but the engineers spent a great deal of time figuring out the dimensions of this motorcycle in order for it to work properly. The offset of the front end, the rake and the trail, the wheelbase, the swing arm angle, all of these things that we don't care about or we don't know about are affected when two different riders sit on the same motorcycle. So when you come to our shop, we like to put you on your bike and we measure it and we set the sags. And the sags are, in layman's term, it's how much the motorcycle settles when you get on it. That's the static sag, or the 1G for 1 gravity sag. Now, 4 different riders are going to have 4 totally different orientations on that motorcycle depending on where they carry their weight, how long their arms are, how tall they are. So it's important to have your bike set up for you. That way, we're returning it to how the engineers wanted it when it left the factory.
There's a misconception, I think, with suspension tuners that it's for racing, but it's not just for racing, is it?
Oh, no. The biggest smiles I've seen leave here are on the street riders. The racers, we're helping them in small increments, depending on their ability and their knowledge of suspension. We can help them. We're always helping them, but we can maybe help them a little bit. Whereas a street rider, we're more apt to be able to help them a lot in terms of their setup.
So if I have a 650 V-Strom or a Honda Veradero or any kind of bike like that, everything that you do applies to that kind of bike as well?
Yeah, yeah. They all can suffer from mis-setup. So some of those bikes are not as tunable or adjustable in terms of preload depending on the cost point of the motorcycle, but we can always make an improvement. We're looking at Derreck's Tiger here. I'm realizing how soft the bike is just taking it off the side stand. It's using perhaps half of its rear suspension travel anyway, just coming vertical. So I know that this thing is soft. Sometimes if the bike is soft enough, I can push it right down to the bump rubber just by hand. And that's not taken into account a passenger's weight or the cornering forces when a rider's into a fast corner. So I know that this thing is crazy soft. And I'm talking about spring rates and preload, not damping. The damping actually feels not too bad. The rebound maybe it's a little bit slow, but it's close. But that spring is unbelievably soft. So we're going to make a huge improvement to this bike just by curing that. And again, I don't think I can get it to where it needs to be with just preload, we may have to change the spring, but we'll look at that. We'll measure the sags and that will become more evident. Yeah, the front by comparison is quite firm. So the balance of the bike is off quite a bit.
So why, you said the front is quite firm, but in my experience, when I brake, it dives in the front.
That's damping. My firmness is in response to a preload spring rate, that kind of thing. So yeah, the diving issue is compression and fork oil level. By raising the fork oil level inside the fork tubes, you can limit how far the bike dives. Raising the fork oil level adds progression. It mimics putting in a progressive spring when you start to raise the oil level up, because the air gap captured on the top of the fork, the pressure gets higher and higher when you have a higher oil level. So it adds to the force, keeping the motorcycle from bottoming. The fork on this Tiger is likely what they call a damping rod fork. It's not a cartridge fork. When you see a cartridge fork, you quite often will see adjusters. There'll be compression adjusters on the bottom, there'll be rebound adjusters on the top. This fork has none of that. So when we're selecting our oil viscosity, when we're creating a target for what we want to accomplish inside the fork to meet the rider's requests, we have to nail it. We have to get it very, very, very close. And then the fork is going to do, we're going to try and get it to do one thing really good, and the others are going to be a compromise. If Derreck's complaint is that it dives excessively on the brakes, we're going to need to make that fork firmer and more progressive. But it's probably not going to handle the little tiny bumps as well. Because we don't have the options of the external compression and rebound adjustability, we can't fine tune it once the fork is built, once the fork's completed. Okay, give me a little bounce, Derreck. 250. It came to the exact same spot from when I measured it. So this one has very little friction, where the Ducati was very sticky when we did that number.
Motorcyclists are fond of spending money, and especially things like Öhlins suspension components. You know, there's certainly a bling factor. Is it really important to go spend tons of money on that kind of stuff for general street use, or really is it just a matter of setting up what's there to begin with? How do you approach that question?
Well, I make it very clear to the rider to tell him or her that we can make huge gains with their stock components. If when they roll up the garage door they want to see a set of Öhlins forks, I'll sell them to them, and I'll set them up so that they're going to work as good or better than their stock stuff. But they don't need it. They do not need that. They're enjoying the aesthetic look of the titanium nitride, of the Öhlins name, for example, on the forks, but we can fix their problems and make huge gains and improvements with the stock forks. It's only when your expectations start to rise do we look at changing the componentry out.
So you think, you're not sure about the shock, you may have to change the shock on my bike, but you're pretty sure you can get by with the stock fork.
The forks, yes, we're going to revalve, we're going to do some work to the stock forks, we're going to look at the spring rates based on our sag numbers, but I haven't told you yet, but we're throwing that shock in the garbage.
That's in the garbage, okay.
Yeah.